Hey guys, Art13131 here, and we are in week 6 now. Ta-dum! Week 6, and we are past the halfway mark, because there's 11 weeks. You can see the last week is a makeup week, so finishing prior assignments and sending your final. Your final is to pick one of your best work this term and mat and frame it. We'll talk about that a little more later, but a matting is basically a paper or cardboard border that shows and it goes around the edges of your artwork and under the frame, showing your artwork through it. So when you pick your frame and matting, you want to be able to avoid covering up critical parts of your artwork with the edges. But the matting and frames usually come together when you purchase them. A lot of the time you can get these things at thrift stores, or you can spend a little bit more and go to Walmart or something like that and get one. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's all the final is. And in week 6 we have 3 assignments. So number 10 is full-faced portrait. Number 11, drawing with shading, no lines. And the homework is tree with personality and a title, or a character and a title for your tree drawing that has to do something with the character or personality of the tree. I'm going to break these up into 2. I know I'm posting this a little late on Wednesday, but it gets pretty involved if I talk about all of them in the same video. So let's talk about number 10, this one, and then tomorrow on Thursday I'll introduce the other 2. You still have plenty of time to do these. It's best to turn all your work in by the following week that it was posted here on my videos, but you still have other time to do that, and also the last week is a makeup week. But I will say, if you haven't gotten to week 4 yet and sent me all your work from the beginning to week 4, you should have done that already to keep up, so you don't have all this stuff piling up on you and a lot of assignments to complete. And maybe I'm going to give feedback when you send them to me for you to get a better grade and work on them a little bit more. And that all takes time, so you want to get them to me as soon as possible. All right, let's talk about number 10, full face portrait. And there's a full face portrait. This one's really great because it has a lot of shading. If you notice, most of the skin has a tone. It doesn't, if skin has a color, it isn't white as paper, then it will have a tone. And so you're going to represent that with some level of tone in your graphite. But that being said, there are very highlighted areas here where there's a reflection mark from light source on the skin that's very bright. So that's where you might have it as white as paper, like these small little areas here on the lip, on the tip of the nose, bridge of the nose right here, in the forehead. And then other areas are in the midtones that aren't totally dark. And then you got your darker areas back here. It all depends on how the light hits your subject and where the highlights are and where the shadow areas are and everything in between. So like I say before, that could be typically 7 different levels of tone from light to dark. And then you have all your rounded areas of a face. There's really no sharp corners around the forehead, eyes, into the nose area, bridge of the nose, side of the nose, upper lip, cheeks, chin, mouth. It all is sort of a rounded edges. So you have gradual transition of tone shading. So it gradually goes into the dark from the light, gradually goes in from the light to the dark. Darker areas, it's not sharp edges and lines. It's more just shading with no lines. There's really no line around the whole lips. There might be a makeup line around eyes, but there's no line down the side of the nose. This is all just shading that's gradual without being like lines that you would write letters or numbers with. And there's no line bordering the bottom of the chin or the face or the ears. It's mostly just shading. Okay, so that's what you really want to focus in on, is no lines in your drawings as much as possible. And we're going to have a whole assignment about that. Now, mapping up, I'm going to provide a video, you look at that, but mapping out the face, there's different ways to do that. I say that the face is kind of like an egg shape, where you have the big round area here and it kind of tapers into a semi-curved point down here. So then you start, you get your lines in there. You might want to start with a ball and then an extended area here, but then you have lines to map out where the eyes are going to go, where the center of the face is. For the full force, it's facing you directly. And at the end, you put the shading and all the detail. You start working up the detail after you get the proportions correct and the placement where the eyes in the head are. Typically, they're in the middle of the head or slightly above that. I mean, this is basically in the middle. I'll show you another one that shows it exactly in the middle. The ears start around where the top of the eye is and go down to where basically the bottom of the nose is. So that's where you want to put your ear, not too high, too low. The mouth, the nose is probably on the 2/3 line down, end of the nose there, and then the mouth is in between that, a little closer to the nose than the chin. So this is a good way to kind of reference what you're going to draw from. You're going to draw from your own face or someone else's face, not a made-up face, not an imaginary face, something you're actually looking at, because I want you to copy what you see. I want you to see all the shading and the proportions, and then put that on paper. That's the practice. Okay, now some of you may be really good at this and can just draw anything from imagination too, and I guess I won't know the difference, but if it's well done, all right. But if it's more amateur, or more beginner, I may ask for that photo. So have a photo of what you were working from to send me so that I can check out what you were seeing and help you along. Typically you want like light coming from one side or the other slightly, not directly on the face. So it's going to give you some shadow areas on the other side of the nose a little more. It's easier to create your shape that way, shape of the face. And let's see if I can find another one. So this one, the center line where the eye levels are, that's basically in the middle of the head, middle way down. Eyes have typically an eye length space in between the eyes. So you have a space here from the side of the head to the eye. It's about the same width as an eye. Then you have the eye. Then you have a space in between the eye. It's the same width as an eye. Then another eye. And then a space going over. That's like 5 spaces that are typically the size, length of an eye. And then you have your eyes here. So this is a good template so you don't put the eyes too close or too far away. from each other. You sort of map them out so there's a space in between the eyes that's about the same size as the length of an eye, and the same on the side of the head. Everybody's eyes are going to be a little different. Some people have really wide eyes, and I don't know how that is, but usually when you're looking at skulls, they are more typically the same than somebody's faces. So it may have a lot to do with the muscle structure and whatnot, how much um, you have under the skin that's going to make that shape appear, regardless of your skeletal head shape, your skull. So then you can map out where the ears are. Typically they're a little lower than the nose, actually, in this one, about where the top of the eyes are. A little lower than the nose, maybe around the top of the lip, or in between anyway. And then you have your nose here, about maybe 2/3 of the way down, and mouth and chin. Mouth being a little closer to the nose than the chin. So you want to map this out and look at this as a reference with what you're going to draw. If it's your face in a photo or somebody else's face, excuse me, then look at that. There was also another one over here. If you're going to have that head slightly tilted down, then the lines become sort of curved as you're mapping this out. So you can dip the head down slightly. You don't have to do this. I'm just saying, here's another template showing how to dip the head slightly down, where you're kind of looking not completely straight up, dip down looking straight at you. And of course then you put the detail and shading, and it becomes this other thing from here. The beginning template is just to get your proportions and placement, and then you start putting the details. Because this is very flat, it doesn't have any shape at all. This is now having shape. The shape comes putting the shading, represented by your light source and where the light is actually hitting. The head can be tilted a little like that if you wanted to, but straight on as much as possible. Okay? So, I will emphasize the shading. These are 3/4 view. We're going to do one with 3/4, where it's slightly turned to the side, but you still see both eyes, but one's a little covered up. That's a 3/4. The ones that are totally facing you are the full face, and that's what you want to have. Full face portrait on this one, not the 3/4. Okay, we're going to do that in next week, I believe. So here's lots of ideas on shading and everything when you're going to start shading yours. Okay, and also I'm going to provide a video. It's really good to watch because they go from shaping the head to placement of eyes, nose, mouth, ears, and then they start putting in detail and shading. So watch that. That'll be included, and watch that and look at these examples. Find your own examples on full face portrait on Google or Bing. I go to Bing, you go to whatever source you know of, full face portrait drawings. Usually they'll come up, but what you want is something with shading so it isn't flat. Most of the ones that, and also don't draw anime face. Draw a realistic face. I don't want to see anime eyes and stuff. Okay, because then it's going to be more imagination. Because I don't think anybody really has an anime face. Maybe. And show me that photo if you do, if you're going to do something like that. I want to see the photo of a real person that has anime eyes and stuff. All right? And then maybe I'll consider it. But otherwise, draw something that is realistic. So this is a real person. Maybe someone else you know. And take a photo of it or look at yourself in a mirror the whole time with the same light source. If this is going to take you days, you may want to take a good photo. Photos on your phone are going to be a little harder to see because they're smaller than like putting it on your computer and referencing it that way would be a bigger image to look at, and I think that might be better. But work it as you will with whatever technology you have. But it's best to probably have a bigger image to be working from. All right, watch that video and look for my other video tomorrow on number 11 and homework. But try to get away from using lines in your drawing as much as possible. Use shading more, and just notice that there's no line that's drawn along your whole head or around the border. So don't put it in. Draw what you see. It's shading that ends or starts in some particular area or meets up with another shade and dissipates or gradually goes into another shade, light or dark. And that's really how things are created. I mean, really look at your own face. Unless you drew a line around your lips, they're not bordered by a line. It's just that their shading ends at a certain point and there's another shade there. That's what makes the border. Unless you went and took a pencil makeup and drew a line around your lips. I mean, some people do that for a certain look. That I'm going to ask about that probably. But you really don't need it to support your drawing. You don't need the lines as much. And you'll see that in a lot of the work. Other thing I wanted to point out was eyes. When you're doing your eyes, there is a nice reflection mark usually that makes, when you put that in, it doesn't have a border around it either. It's just that this is light and that's dark. There's no line drawn around that. So don't put that in because it's going to look silly. It won't look accurate. The reflection mark makes the eye look glassy. We did some eyes, and I mentioned this to several students. But put it in because it helps it look glassy and round, actually. Especially when it's off-shaped like this, because the eye is round, so the image is not completely straight. It's kind of catching the curve of the eye. And then back here you have different shading on the white. It's not all one color of white. That will make the eye look round in the eye socket when you do that. When you put this other shading in there, and then lighter shading toward the middle of the eye, that's all going to make it look round. When you notice this about your own eyes, really study everything and notice what you're looking at. All the color part usually has imperfections and little offshoots and lines and specks and stuff in there. That's what you should put in. Don't put one tone in here. Now the pupil, yes, that's one tone. Usually it's very dark tone. Above the eyes, you have, your brow area. That's going to be a shadow area, but it's not total shadow. You have light and darks in there. And then the eyelashes are maybe longer than some of you may think. So really study that and put that in too. Let's look at another one. Okay. The white of the eye is not totally white all the way around. It has shading from the top lid and on the sides and corners where they dip around and they're not catching the light as much. That's where the shades are. You have this skin area right here in the middle corners, the inside corners. Don't forget that part. Reflection mark, all the imperfections in the color that make that look more real. Put them in. They're just light and dark tones that are scratched in where they are. Look at that and study that. And then your eyelashes. Sometimes the bottom ones are just as long as the top, or close to it anyway. Then all this shadowing on the eyes. all this dark area, even under here, and then it gets light. It curves around, catches the light, and then you have your eyebrows. And then same with the nose. From here to here, it's a gradual transition from a darker tone to a lighter tone to a darker tone. There's no line in here. A lot of students draw it and they put a big line right there like that's accurate. It isn't. Look at your own face and you'll notice there's no line right here for the bridge of the nose. It's all shading that gradually goes into one shade to the other as it goes across the bridge of the nose. This is typical with most of the face because it's rounded, and yes, there's a little emphasis right on the top of the eye with a line. It's more like a shading line. It's kind of broad, but the bottom, not really. This is the shades. Okay, so this is what I want you to notice about everything. And those are female eyes. These are male eyes, as we can recognize mostly. Same thing with the eye, the white of the eye here. It's got some shading in it, reflection mark, difference in the coloring than the iris, darker areas above and below the eye. This artist is relying on kind of scratchy marks, which they kind of make a character, but they also talk about a texture, which isn't maybe accurate. The skin isn't that scratchy. So I just wonder about this one being that good. The eyes are very strong, but this one's more smooth on the nose shading. Again, there's no lines in here. It's all shading that's gradually, and you use the side of your pencil. If you haven't started doing that by now, you've got to start using the side of your pencil with an overhand grip rather than a writing grip, and making scratchy lines and trying to shade that way. It's harder. And if you did get a graphite pencil, a total graphite pencil, those are really great for shading because the whole thing is graphite, so there's no wood in it. The whole side of that pencil is graphite. The charcoal works really well too. You have to have the kneaded eraser for it, but it can smudge and make all kind of really cool tones very quickly. In fact, when I was drawing in school, back in grad school and undergrad, I went to charcoal after pencil because it was so much quicker to get the results I wanted. It was like half the time. And you can watch anything you're wondering about. You can go to Google or Bing and see examples. You can go to YouTube and put that in and see videos. That's what I'm providing for you. So it's the same thing. All right. I think that's enough for now. Any questions on any of this, let me know, and we'll get some help to you. All right. Look for my other video tomorrow. Watch the video on full portrait drawing, full face. And we'll talk with you tomorrow in another video.